the output here. All right. So look at this, and again, all of this is what I have on the board, very easy. But something that I wanted to show you is that Excel can also do this for you. All right. I showed you this last week. I'm going to show you this a few more times as we go through various things. But Excel has a what-if analysis. So under data, right here, if you go to what if, they have what's called goal seek. Okay, so data, what if, goal seek. We can use Excel to make this calculation for us. Now, remember last week, and I'm not going to take the time to add it in today, but remember last on Thursday when we did our add-ins, one of those add-ins was Solver. Because remember someone asked how you do that on Apple. We had that conversation for a couple minutes. Remember that little feature in there? Solver is a more sophisticated version of goal seek. Okay? Because with Solver, you can actually add constraints to whatever it is you're solving. Okay? We'll use Solver in the next section of the course. Okay? But with goal seek, we can have this calculate our break even for us. Okay? So if, okay, exam question, given this information here, calculate your break-even point in units. Okay, so there's our sales. Our variable costs are 60% of sales, which means our contribution margin is going to be 40% of sales. Okay, so total fixed costs divided by our contribution margin. Our operating break-even point is going to be 62,500 units. Okay. Well, with what if, okay, we click on this, go into goal seek. What we can do is set sell. Okay, so here's our unit sales right here. Oh, I'm sorry. We need to set our operating income to 0. Okay, we're calculating break even. Operating income to 0 by changing our unit sales. Okay, so this is just an example of how Excel can calculate that for us. And notice that our unit sales are 6250, which is what we just saw down here.
So it changed your input area?
Yeah. Yeah, because notice that sales are now different than what they were before. It changed this right here. It changed our unit. So this is the input area. Okay, last part of chapter 1. This is the input area here. So our sales are keying off our price times unit sales. So I mean, we could have changed the price. Okay, suppose we expect to sell 80,000. Well, what price would we need to charge to break even? Set sell this to 0 by changing price.
Okay. I misinterpreted it.
Yeah, and this is where Solver becomes nice, because if we wanted to do both of them, then we would need to put some constraints in there in terms of what maximum sales might be and what our outputs might look. So again, Solver is a more sophisticated version of what if. Okay. And that's what I have over here. So again, this is using Excel to calculate that for us. And of course, if we wanted to, what I have here is a target of 800,000. Okay. So if we wanted that to be 800,000, 103, by changing our unit sales, then there you go. And notice that what we just did with Excel matches our brute force calculations over there. One of my co-authors said that that's the brute force method over there. Okay, so again, exam questions, calculate break-even point in units. If you have a target operating profit of $650,520, calculate your units required, your sales units required to meet your target profit, so forth and so on. The interesting part of that is, well, what is a reasonable target profit? And that gets into your required return, which is what we're going to talk about the last third of the course. We're going to go back through required return and all that stuff. Okay? And I think that pretty much wraps up chapter 6. So questions about any of that? Questions about what is expected of you on chapter 6? I don't care. The question will simply be, that's bad, it doesn't matter. The question will be calculate, how many units do you need to sell to break even? So if you want to use goal seek or brute force, what I'm interested in is answering the question. I mean, it's kind of hard. The only way I can really test this is to get on the exam and say, hey, what menu selections do you have to do to use a goal seek to answer that question? Which means you got to go home and memorize old data and what if analysis and goal seek. And I have trouble doing that to a group of seniors. I'm more interested in you doing the calculations. But again, the point of this course, one of the major points of this course, is learning how to do things on your calculator on Excel. Okay. Other questions? Other questions? Okay. Then let me just call your attention to a couple things in chapter 7 and we'll call it a day. Like I say, chapter 7 is on time value of money. Make sure you go through all the homework problems on there. I have some supplemental problems posted as well, which are intended to give you an idea of what you can expect on the exam. So between the supplemental problems that I have posted and these in-class examples, notice that I have a question at the top. Between those two sources, that should give you a good idea of what to expect on the exam. The major point here is just to make sure that all your time value of money calculations that you can do on your calculator, that you can do on Excel. Because remember, you can't bring your calculator into the testing lab. Okay? So, Amir.
On this question, actually, your question says 20 years on 8%, but your N is 30 and your
Yeah, and that's because what I've done, unfortunately, I need to go through and clean this up because I've made in-class changes and I inadvertently saved them.
Okay.
They got reposted back on there. So yeah, thank you for calling that to my attention. When you see an obvious mistake like that, then plug it in here. But yeah, plug it in there, okay? And I think there might be one or two others. I need to clean that stuff up. There might be another one in there, Dolly.
Can you ask exam questions about the proof of time value of money, or just to know?
No, again, I mean, I really can't. I'd like to, but I can't. So, the exam question, although this is so easy, I don't even think it would be on there. Calculate the future value of 500 invested now, 20 years, 8%. Yeah. So, so here's your
very, very good.
here's your Excel formula. So the gist of this is making sure you understand how the Excel formulas work, which sounds easy, but understand that what you're putting into your formulas is the total compounding periods and the periodic rate. So using the periodic rate, for example, whether you calculate that in your input section or in the formula, doesn't really matter to me, but understand you got to do that somewhere. Because fair notice on the exam, one answer will be as if you made that mistake. Okay? This is time value money. You guys are sick of this. I was talking to one of your classmates before class. Yeah, I'm going to have time value money in every single class. I know that. That's why I'm not going to insult you by going over yet one more time. Okay? So make sure you're on top of that. So pull out your calculator, old examples. You know, like I said, I've given you plenty of examples here. Make sure you're on top of those things. In fact, I think what I just showed you is on this spreadsheet right here, or what I was just referring to, is on this spreadsheet right here, because now this is compounded semi-annually. All right, so our compounding period should be 40, and actually our periodic rate would be, I need to clean these up. Our periodic rate would be
That's correct.
4%. Yeah, again, what's happened here is I've used examples and I've changed it and then inadvertently saved it and thrown it back on there. Okay? So make sure you're on top of that stuff. Great. Make sure that you can do an amortization schedule. Okay, in my opinion, if you graduate UCF with a finance degree and can't do an amortization schedule, we have failed you. That's not even your fault. We failed you, okay? So make sure that you can do an amortization schedule. Do we need to go over this? Because I don't want to insult you. But if I don't want to insult you, but I want to make sure I fill in whatever holes are necessary. Because not everybody's had the exact same lockstep program.
I'm just wondering, like on the test, because whenever I did it, I noticed where that it got rounded, like that 0.556%. When you did your calculations to get 1,200, you actually rounded it to 0.56.
And on Excel, that's not an issue because you should be using formulas anyhow.
Right, but if I do what it says on your instructions, 5.556.
Right.
Whenever I do that,
Right.
I get a different answer than $1,200 a month.
Well, off the top of my head, the only thing I know to tell you is it's because you're not putting in that formula right there.
Right, but see, your formula says 0.056.
Yes.
But your thing says it's
Oh, I'm sorry. I see what you're saying.
0.0556.
That's what you're saying. All right. I surrender.
No,
I need to clean this up a little bit.
So my point is, like, on the exam, it'll be pretty, because I went for a long time, I was like, why am I not getting 1,200 until I finally realized that.
Exam question. You're going to purchase a car for $28,000. Tax, tag, titles, all this, the whole deal. I hate to use the phrase out the door, but $28,000 out the door. You're going to put down $3,000, and you're going to finance the balance over 5 years at what's it going for now? 5.5%?
Yeah.
Okay. 5.23%.
Oh, great.
This is a senior finance class. Exam question. Calculate your monthly payment. Calculate your monthly payment. I'll give you 60 seconds, and if nobody's got it by then we'll go through it anyhow, but I'll give you 60 seconds to work on it. You guys are a lot of fun. When you guys are fun, it always makes it more fun for me too.
I know, that's when I get paid.
Earnings report coming out in 30 seconds. Sir.
474.42.
Opening bid of 474.13.
42.
474.42. Right?
I have 438.45.
438.45.
466.25.
Outstanding. 466.45. Glad we're going over this. Okay. Let's see. Present value. What's our present value here?
25.
25,000, because remember, our payments are based off of what we're borrowing, not the total cost of the car. Fair warning, that'll be one of the answer choices, because that would be a huge mistake to make in the dealership. They'll be happy to sell it to you for that. Because if you plug in $28,000 as your present value, your payments are going to be higher. They'll be happy to sell it to you. In fact, I have a car deal, I didn't bring it with me, but that actually happened. They took advantage of this poor girl, a whole nother story. But the gist of it is, this $3,000 that she put down, she made a donation to the dealership. It was disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. They based the payments on the 28. That's the gist of what happened. 20-year-old single mom of 3 who did that to her. You know, assistant manager of a store somewhere. Absolutely disgraceful. Okay, what's a number of compounding periods? 60, 5 years of monthly payments. What is our periodic rate? 0.0523
Divided by 12.
divided by 12. Why are we dividing by 12?
It's monthly.
Because it's monthly payments, so however the frequent the payment is how frequent the compound. Future value, 0. And by the way, I neglected to specify that this is an amortized loan. Okay. So, assuming it's an amortized loan, future value is 0. Okay. And what I have over here is the payment function. Okay, so I'm using Excel's payment function to throw in all these inputs, which is simply that. Okay, so here are all your inputs necessary. Type would be, without looking at it,
0.
yeah, but I mean, what's the decision there?
Beginning or
Yeah, whether or not it's an ordinary annuity or an annuity due. Okay, so here's your periodic rate, number of periods, so forth and so on. Okay, so I have that in there, and I have the brute force formula right here. You can use either one you want, makes no difference to me. And this is the amortization schedule. We know whether or not we're right because, and this is the value of being able to put together an amortization schedule. Do I need to do this for you guys? Do we need to go through this real quick? Okay, I'm seeing at least one head. We'll do it quickly. All right? Okay, how you set up an amortization schedule makes no difference to me, depending on what textbook you see, so forth and so on. The way that I always set them up is period, payment, interest, principal, and then the loan balance. Okay? So, we've already decided that we've got 60 payments. Okay. Our beginning balance is
25,000.
Okay. We think that the payment is $474.42. Okay. How do we determine the interest portion of any payment? If you're weak on your amortization schedules, hear this. How do we determine the interest portion of any payment? Okay, the beginning balance times our what rate? The periodic rate. I'm going to put the periodic rate right here just for convenience. There's our periodic rate right there. So the interest portion of any payment is the balance at the beginning of the period, which in this case is 25 times periodic rate. Principal portion? Payment minus this, and of course that's the amount that our loans reduced. So far so good? far so good?
Mhm.
Okay. How do we calculate that? We're not going to do this for 60 payments, but one more. How do we calculate the interest portion of the second payment? Okay. Balance at the beginning of the period, which in this case is the 24/6 times periodic rate. Principal is the difference. Balance is reduced by the principal. Everybody with me? Okay. That continues for 60 payments, and we know whether or not we're correct because the ending balance will be 0 or something darn close to it, depending on if we've done some rounding. In this case, the 474.42 that I plugged in was a rounded number, so we've got just a little bit of rounding down here. On this one, that's not the case because I was actually using formulas to plug in the exact payment, which might be, this long for all I know. Okay. But on the exam, what I will not have is 474.42, 474.41, 474.40, 30. I'm not going to do that. But one of the payment choices on there will be if you financed $28,000 instead of $25,000. Okay. Questions so far? So make sure you can calculate car payments, make sure you can calculate mortgage payments, which is the same way, just different numbers. Exam question. How much will you still owe on the loan after 30 payments? How much will you still owe on the loan after 30 payments?
Whatever you
Well, on the exam, for purposes of this class, you can answer that 2 ways. One is if you crank out an amortization schedule real quick, like I just did, then you scroll down. But there's another way. Not on the calculator, although you can do it on a calculator as well. But regardless of whether you use a calculator or Excel or something else, what's another way?
Final value after 30 payments?
The question is, how much will you still owe after 30 payments? The balance of the loan at any point in time is the present value of the remaining payments. The balance of the loan at any point in time is the present value of the remaining payments. So, to answer the question, your payments are $474.42. You would have 30 remaining at your periodic rate. Calculate the present value. So those of you that have your calculator, you can do that if you want to prove it, or Excel, what have you. And that means that you would still owe $13,314. Okay. Now, if you do that on your calculator while you're practicing, it might be off by a couple of cents, again, because of rounding here, but it'll be darn close to that. Okay, so you got to allow for a little bit of that rounding on the exam. It depends on whether you're using formulas or whether you're plugging in the numbers like I'm doing. Okay. But again, I'm not going to have, 25, 26, 24, 20, those aren't going to be your answer choices. But what will be your answer choices are 13,314, 12,897, 13,728. Those will be answer choices. Questions so far? Okay, exam question. What is the interest portion of the 31st payment? Well, again, 2 ways. One, if you crank out an amortization schedule, then you simply look. The other way is that the interest portion of any payment is the balance at the beginning of the period times the periodic rate. Well, what we just said a minute ago, calculating the present value of 30 remaining payments, that is the balance at the beginning of the period. So you take that multiplied by your periodic rate. the easy way is,
Process.
the easy way is crank out an amortization schedule. Do that. But the other way is, the question was, what's the interest portion of the 31st payment? The interest portion of that is the balance at the beginning of the period times the periodic rate.
Oh,
You know what the periodic rate is? What, I forgot.
0.05.
Whatever that is, I forgot what it is. But the balance at the beginning of the period is the balance after 30 payments, which is what we just calculated a minute ago. So you gotta do 2 steps.
yeah, I'm visual.
Yeah.
That one may work.
All right, so far, so good? If not, what I told you guys on Thursday was chapter 7 is gonna be driven by your questions.
Wouldn't we need was that the beginning, the balance at the beginning of the period?
Yeah.
Wouldn't we need to do this amortization schedule anyway, since you guys the balance at the beginning of the period?
I don't understand your question.
Well, you said you have to multiply the rate times.
Yeah,
the
hang on a
beginning
minute.
balance.
If you guys are good with chapter 7, we can call it a day right now and go home.
Question on chapter 7.
Well, I'm still answering his question. I'm hearing a lot of chatter. I'm listening to his question, but nobody else is. But we can go, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Same.
Tame.
You said the beginning balance is multiplied by the rate.
The
right?
periodic rate, right?
Periodic rate.
Right.
So then, don't you have to define the beginning balance for that period? Using
Yeah.
the amortization schedule?
Yeah, and in this example, that's what we just did a minute ago when I asked you what was the balance, how much would you still owe after 30 payments? Because that would be the balance at the beginning of the 31st payment.
So there's no real way to do this without making a schedule?
No. No. You calculate the present value of the remaining payments. Okay. So that's step 1. And that gets you this number right here, this number right here. And then step 2 is multiply this number times your periodic rate. You can do that on your calculator. You can't do that on the exam, but, so no, you don't have to build an amortization schedule. Although, with a series of questions like this, it would probably be more time efficient to crank out an amortization schedule. Amir?
Can you actually show in Excel how you're getting the first step, the present value of the remaining?
Yeah, let me hold that thing, because we need to spend a couple more minutes. I usually let you guys go like 10, 15 minutes early, so spot me a couple minutes early. Yeah, if you want to hang around a minute, let me get to a couple more bigger things. Other questions? Okay. Another question, which again with an amortization schedule would be easy. How much interest would you pay in total between payments 31 and 40? So starting with payment 31 through payment 40, how much interest would you pay in total? That is an example of a question that's not designed to drive you crazy, although for senior finance majors it should be easy at this point. That was a standard tax planning calculation that we did every single year when you're working with a business planning out their taxes. Well, interest is deductible. So if you're doing a 3-year forecast of their tax liability, then one of the things you're going to need to do in there is determine how much interest they're expected to pay over the next 3 years. And it's going to vary for each year because the balance is declining. Okay. Again, on an amortization schedule, simply add it up. If you don't have an amortization schedule, then you need to look at the difference in the balances at those 2 periods. Okay? So on amortization schedules, I'll entertain questions, up until the exam time on that. I also have on here uneven cash flows, so make sure you look at this. Calculating the present value of uneven cash flow, I'm using the NPV function. So something to make sure you're on top of with respect to Excel is that the NPV function on Excel does not calculate NPV. It calculates the present value of future cash flows. Don't ask me why. I even have that on there. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I suppose that whoever did it wasn't that well versed in I don't know. But for whatever reason, the NPV function doesn't actually calculate NPV. Okay. So make sure you're on top of that. Also, make sure, and you may or may, I don't know how much you've covered this in other classes, but you've got IRR. And by the way, with IRR, I think that's what I have here, which apparently was inadvertently deleted. Make sure that you pay attention to the order of the payments, okay? Because this is payment 1 through 5. If your payments are 5 through 1, then it's going to give you a different result. Okay? So make sure that you pay attention to the orders. Everybody hear that?
Yes.
You heard that?
Yes.
Okay. You sure? Okay. Make sure you pay attention to the order. Also, make sure you look at the modified internal rate of return. Because one of the disadvantages of IRR, as a reminder, one of the disadvantages of IRR is that it assumes that the payments you receive can be reinvested at the IRR. Remember that? Okay, I'm not seeing many heads move in the north-south direction, so I'll take that. One of the, and that's what I have, that's what all this stuff is. In fact, it starts over here on the IRR sheet. Okay, so I've got a whole series going on here. But the upshot of it is that the internal rate of return mathematically assumes that the payments that you receive can be reinvested at that internal rate of return, which may not necessarily be true. In fact, I would argue it probably isn't true, because why would that highly likely not be true? Well, keep in mind that with your capital budgeting decisions, when you're using IRR, the reason you picked this project in the first place is because it had the highest IRR. So when you start receiving the cash flow from that project, I would suggest that many times, if not most of the time, you're probably not going to be able to reinvest it at that IRR. You're going to reinvest it at a lower rate, whether that's sticking it in T-bills or paying off debt or whatever the case may be. Okay? So for that reason, if you'll pardon me for a moment, actual rate of return is going to be lower than the IRR. And that actual is what's called the modified internal rate of return. Again, I'm not sure how much you covered this in prior courses, but that's what's called the modified rate of return. So when you look at, and that's what this spreadsheet is right here. So when you look at your modified rate of return function, okay, you've got the values, of course, but you've got a financing rate, which is a borrowing rate, and your reinvestment rate. Okay, so in particular, pay attention to the reinvestment rate. And again, that's what I have on here. Okay, so make sure you pay attention to that. Also, make sure you look at this last example, retirement problems and car payment, mortgage payment problems, college problems. My favorite types of time value of money questions, because they are real world. They're real life. Okay, so those are my favorite types of questions, so make sure you look at those. Okay? All right, thanks for sticking with me. I know there was a couple of questions. I'll be happy to hang around and answer those. Good class today. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll start going over homework chapter 5 tomorrow. Okay? See you then.